"You're far too poor to be here," my future daughter-in-law hissed, her perfect white teeth barely moving as she smiled for the benefit of anyone who might be watching. "The invitation was a courtesy, Eleanor. Surely you understand that someone like you doesn't belong at Chateau Belmer." The champagne flute trembled in my hand as Alexandra Thornfield, Lexi as she insisted everyone call her, adjusted the Cartier bracelet on her slender wrist and cast a dismissive glance at my navy blue dress. I'd bought it specially for this occasion, stretching my modest budget because I wanted to look appropriate for my only son's engagement party. "I don't understand," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "William wants me at his wedding. I'm his mother." Lexi's laugh was like broken crystal, sharp, brittle, dangerous. "William wants to advance in my father's firm. William wants the connections my family provides. William wants the life I can give him." She leaned closer, the scent of her $500 perfume suffocating me. "What William doesn't want is his shabby little mother embarrassing him in front of everyone who matters." I searched the crowded ballroom for my son, finally spotting him across the room, deep in conversation with a silver-haired man I recognized as Lexi's father. William looked so handsome in his tailored suit, so at ease in this world of wealth and privilege, a world I had sacrificed everything to help him reach. "I don't believe you," I said, straightening my shoulders. "I need to hear this from William." Lexi's perfectly manicured hand gripped my wrist with surprising strength. "Don't make a scene, Eleanor. It would be so undignified." Her eyes, cold as January frost, met mine. "The wedding is in 3 weeks. You'll receive a lovely gift basket and photos afterward. William agrees it's for the best." The room seemed to tilt beneath me as the meaning of her words sank in. My own son had agreed to ban me from his wedding. The boy I had raised alone after Robert died, working my fingers raw to restore paintings that museums couldn't afford to send to bigger conservation studios. The child for whom I'd declined positions in New York and Chicago, staying in our small town so he could have stability and consistency. "You're lying," I whispered, but the doubt had already crept in, cold and insidious. Lexi smiled, triumph flickering in her eyes. "Why don't we ask him?" She raised one elegant hand, and William immediately excused himself from his conversation and made his way toward us. I watched him approach, searching his familiar face for some sign that this was all a terrible misunderstanding. "Everything okay here?" he asked, his eyes darting nervously between us. "Your mother seems confused about the wedding arrangements," Lexi said smoothly. I explained that, while we appreciate her support, the ceremony at Chateau Belmer is quite exclusive. I looked at my son, my beautiful boy, my whole world, waiting for him to contradict her, waiting for him to say, "Of course my mother will be at my wedding. How could you even suggest otherwise?" Instead, he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mom, we've been over this," he said, his voice strained. "The venue has strict limitations. Lexi's family has connections there, and there are certain expectations." The betrayal knocked the breath from my lungs. "You're ashamed of me," I said, the realization crashing over me like a wave. "After everything—" "Not here," William hissed, glancing around at the curious onlookers. "We can discuss this later." "There's nothing to discuss," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice as I placed my barely touched champagne on a passing waiter's tray. "Enjoy your exclusive wedding. I won't embarrass you with my presence." I turned and walked away, my head high despite the tears threatening to spill. Behind me, I heard Lexi murmur something, followed by uncomfortable laughter from my son, who had once promised me on his father's grave that he would always make me proud, always take care of me the way I had taken care of him. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside the luxury hotel where the engagement party was being held. I fumbled in my purse for my car keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip them. "Ma'am, are you all right?" The valet, a young man barely older than William had been when he left for college, looked at me with genuine concern. His name tag read, Miguel. "I'm fine," I lied, attempting a smile. "Just heading home a bit earlier than expected." "Let me get your car," he said, reaching for my ticket. As he jogged toward the parking area, I allowed myself a moment of weakness, leaning against a marble column and closing my eyes. Chateau Belmer. The name had struck me like a physical blow when William first mentioned it as their wedding venue. I hadn't heard it in nearly 50 years, but it instantly transported me back to sun-drenched summers and whispered promises among crumbling grandeur. Gabriel Belmire, my Gabe, my first love, my dearest friend, the boy who'd called me Firestarter because of my copper-red hair and refused to believe I could never be more than the daughter of the local art teacher. The boy who'd shown me his family's deteriorating estate and shared his dreams of restoring it to glory. One day, he'd promised, sketching elaborate plans in his leather-bound notebook, this place will be magnificent again, and you'll be right here with me, fixing all those old paintings in the ballroom. But then he was gone, sent to relatives in Europe when his family's finances collapsed entirely. Our letters had continued for a while, growing gradually less frequent until they stopped altogether. Life had carried on. I met Robert, fell in love, had William. I built a career restoring artwork that others had forgotten or damaged or deemed not valuable enough for the major conservation centers. And now, decades later, the universe had played the cruelest joke. My son was to be married at the very place that had once represented all my youthful hopes, and I wasn't even allowed to attend. Your car, ma'am. Miguel had returned, holding the door of my 15-year-old Honda Civic that looked absurdly out of place among the luxury vehicles lining the hotel's circular drive. Thank you, I said, pressing a $5 bill into his hand. A modest tip, but the best I could manage. Drive safely, he replied, closing my door with the same care he'd shown to the Bentleys and Maseratis earlier. As I pulled away from the glittering hotel, a wild, reckless idea began to form in my mind. What if, after all these years, I reached out to Gabriel? The Chateau Belmire that now hosted exclusive weddings had to have some connection to him or his family, didn't it? Perhaps he would remember me, remember us, remember the girl I had been before life's responsibilities had worn me down to this. A woman deemed too shabby to attend her own son's wedding. It was ridiculous, of course. A fantasy born of hurt and humiliation. Even if I could somehow contact him, even if he remembered me, what could he possibly do? Wave a magic wand and make Lexi respect me? Force my son to remember his roots? And yet, as I drove through the darkness toward my small, solitary apartment, the idea refused to die. Because while Lexi saw only an aging woman in a discount dress, there had once been a boy who looked at me and saw fire. The week after the engagement party passed in a blur of unanswered calls from William. Each time his name flashed on my phone screen, I let it go to voicemail. Each message sounded more frustrated than the last. Mom, you're overreacting. Mom, you know how important this is for my career. Mom, please be reasonable. Not once did he say, I'm sorry. Not once did he acknowledge the knife he'd twisted in my heart. I threw myself into my work, grateful for the meticulous concentration required to restore a small Francis Davis millet that a local museum had entrusted to me. The delicate brushwork demanded such focus that for hours at a time, I could almost forget the humiliation of that night. Almost. By Friday evening, the persistent knocking at my apartment door told me William had finally decided a phone call wasn't enough. I considered ignoring it, but the neighbors would complain. And besides, hadn't I raised him to face problems head-on? When I opened the door, the sight of him hit me with a fresh wave of pain. He looked so much like his father. The same strong jaw, the same crease between his eyebrows when he was worried. You've been avoiding me, he said, brushing past me into the apartment without waiting for an invitation. Yes, he paused, clearly expecting more. Excuses, perhaps, or tearful recriminations. When none came, he sighed heavily. Mom, you're making this much harder than it needs to be. I crossed my arms. Am I? Please, explain to me how I should make it easier for my son to ban me from his wedding. Nobody's banning you, he protested, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. It's just, the venue is extremely exclusive. Lexi's family pulled a lot of strings to secure it. There are expectations, and I don't meet those expectations. He had the decency to look uncomfortable. Chateau Belmire hosts events for dignitaries, celebrities, royalty. The guest list is carefully curated, and your mother didn't make the cut. My voice was steady, though my heart was shattering anew. Tell me, William, would your father have made the list? Or would he too be an embarrassment with his mechanic's hands and community college education? That's not fair, he said, flushing. Dad would understand the importance of connections in my field. He always wanted the best for me. The best, I repeated softly. Is that what Lexi is? The best? She comes from an important family. Her father's firm represents half the Fortune 500. Do you have any idea what this marriage means for my future? I looked around my modest apartment, at the worn furniture, the carefully mended curtains, the one luxury I allowed myself, a small original painting by a local artist I'd helped early in his career. Everything in this space represented choices I'd made for William's future, sacrifices that had once seemed worthwhile. I have some idea about sacrificing for someone's future, I said quietly, but I never imagined that investment would yield a return where I wasn't welcome. William's expression softened slightly. It's not personal, Mom. It's just business. Your wedding is business? In our circles, yes, every aspect of it. The venue, the guest list, the photographer. It's all about creating the right impression. And I'm the wrong impression. He didn't deny it, which hurt more than any argument could have. There will be other celebrations, he offered. Maybe a small dinner after the honeymoon, something more casual, where my unfashionable presence wouldn't embarrass them. Get out, I said softly. Mom, get out, William. I have work to do. After he left, I sat alone in my silent apartment, staring at nothing. The pain had crystallized into something harder, sharper. I'd spent decades believing that my sacrifices had meaning, that in giving William every opportunity, I was building something that would last. Now I saw the truth. I'd raised a son who could look me in the eye and tell me I wasn't good enough to attend his wedding. On impulse, I went to my bedroom closet and reached for the old hat box on the top shelf. It held the few mementos I'd kept from before William, before Robert, artifacts from a girl I sometimes barely remembered being. Inside were faded photographs, pressed flowers, ticket stubs from forgotten concerts, and beneath them all, a leather-bound sketchbook I hadn't opened in decades. My hands trembled as I lifted it, the leather soft and worn beneath my fingertips. I opened it slowly, and there he was, Gabriel Belmere, preserved in pencil sketches and hasty watercolors. His dark curls, his serious eyes, his rare, transformative smile. I'd drawn him dozens of times that last summer, trying to capture something I couldn't yet name. Mixed among my amateur portraits were his drawings, architectural sketches of the chateau, detailed plans for restoration, visions of what the crumbling estate could become. On the final page, he'd sketched us both standing before the restored grand entrance, and beneath it written, "You and me, fire starter, someday." I traced the words with my fingertip, memories flooding back with an intensity that took my breath away. The way he'd looked at me, not as the art teacher's awkward daughter, but as someone who mattered, someone with fire. Turning to my laptop, I hesitated only briefly before typing Chateau Belmere into the search bar. The website that appeared was everything Lexi would worship. Elegant, exclusive, dripping with old-world luxury. The Northeast's most prestigious event venue, it proclaimed, where history and exclusivity meet. I clicked through the professionally photographed galleries, barely recognizing the transformed estate. The crumbling walls Gabriel and I had explored were now immaculate, the overgrown gardens tamed into manicured perfection. It was beautiful, certainly, but sterile somehow, missing the wild soul that had once made it magical. At the bottom of the About page was a contact form. Before I could reconsider, I began typing, "To whom it may concern, 50 years ago, I spent my summers exploring the grounds of what was then the Belmere family estate with my dearest friend, Gabriel Belmere. Among my treasured possessions is his sketchbook, filled with his early dreams of restoring the chateau. I recently learned that my son is to be married at your venue, though I will not be attending. However, I wondered if Gabriel is still connected to the property, and if so, if you might forward my contact information to him. I would love to congratulate him on realizing his vision so magnificently. Sincerely, Eleanor Winters, formerly Eleanor Caldwell." I attached a photo of one of Gabriel's sketches, then hit send before I could lose my nerve. It was foolish, of course. Most likely, the Belmere family had sold the property decades ago to developers who had simply kept the name for its cachet. The message would probably be read by some marketing intern who would either ignore it or send a generic response. Yet as I closed my laptop and returned the sketchbook to its place among my memories, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. A tiny, rebellious spark of the girl I had once been. The girl Gabriel had called Firestarter. I didn't expect a response to my impulsive message. The following morning, I woke with a flush of embarrassment at my midnight sentimentality. Successful, exclusive venues don't generally care about the nostalgic ramblings of aging women. I tried to put it out of my mind as I prepared for my Saturday volunteer shift at the Community Arts Center, where I taught basic conservation techniques to interested adults. My phone rang just as I was gathering my materials. Unknown number? Probably another extended warranty scam. I almost didn't answer, but some instinct made me reach for it. Hello? A brief silence then. Is this Eleanor Caldwell? Eleanor Winters now, I suppose? That voice, deeper than I remembered, weathered by time and perhaps whiskey, but with the same distinctive cadence that had once narrated my dreams. I sank into the nearest chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. Yes, I managed. This is Eleanor. Another pause. It's Gabriel. Gabriel Belmere. The world tilted on its axis. 50 years, dissolved in an instant. Gabe, I whispered. You got my message. A warm chuckle traveled through the line. I did. Nearly fell out of my chair when I saw your name in that sketch. You kept the sketchbook all this time? Of course I did. The words came automatically. It was all I had left of you. The admission hung in the air between us, too honest for a first conversation after so many decades. But before I could backpedal or make a joke, he responded with equal candor. I tried to find you, years ago, when I first came back from Europe. Your parents had moved, and nobody seemed to know where. This was before the internet made stalking old friends socially acceptable. I smiled despite the riot of emotions in my chest. I was probably already married by then, living in Vermont with Robert. Robert, he repeated. Your husband? Yes, he passed away nearly 15 years ago. Heart attack. I'm sorry, Ellie. The nickname, so natural on his lips, sent a shiver down my spine. Were you happy? With him? We were, I said honestly. He was a good man, uncomplicated, kind. We had one son, William, the one getting married at my chateau. The way he said my chateau confirmed what I had scarcely dared to hope. Gabriel had actually realized his boyhood dream. He'd restored his family's estate to its former glory. Yes, I said, though I won't be attending. Why not? The humiliation burned fresh. It's complicated. I've got time. His voice was gentle, coaxing. Unless you need to be somewhere? I glanced at the clock. My class. Actually, I do. I teach a conservation workshop on Saturday mornings. Conservation? So you pursued art, after all. The pleasure in his voice warmed me. Art restoration, yes. Nothing glamorous. Small museums, private collections, pieces others consider not valuable enough for the major studios. Saving the forgotten treasures, he said. That sounds exactly like the Ellie I knew, always seeing the worth in things others overlooked. Something in his tone made me wonder if he was talking about more than just art. I should go, I said reluctantly. My students will be waiting. Have dinner with me? The abrupt invitation caught me off guard. What? Dinner tonight. I want to hear everything I've missed in the last 50 years, and I suspect your story about this wedding needs a good bottle of wine and my undivided attention. My heart hammered against my ribs. Where are you calling from? I assumed Connecticut. I'm in Boston for the weekend. Some tedious hospitality industry conference. Please say yes, Ellie, for old time's sake, if nothing else. I thought of my usual Saturday night. Frozen dinner, maybe a documentary, early to bed. Then I thought of Gabriel, my Gabriel, just miles away after all these years. Yes, I said, surprising myself with my certainty. Where shall I meet you? The Oak Room at the Fairmont, 8 o'clock. And Ellie? Yes? Wear something that makes you feel like the fire starter. After we hung up, I sat motionless, my mind racing. Gabriel Belmere, the boy whose dreams had seemed impossibly grand in our small town. The first person who ever made me believe I could be more than my circumstances. And now, apparently, the owner of the exclusive venue where my son was to be married, the venue I had been deemed too shabby to enter. The irony was almost too perfect. My workshop passed in a blur. I demonstrated cleaning techniques and supervised practice attempts, all while my thoughts whirled with memories and questions. What did Gabriel look like now? Had life been kind to him? Was he married? Did he have children? And most dangerously, would he still look at me and see fire? Or would his gaze hold the same disappointment I'd seen in my son's eyes? By the time I returned home, anxiety had bloomed into full-blown panic. The Oak Room was one of Boston's most elegant restaurants. What had I been thinking, agreeing to meet him there? I rummaged through my closet, dismayed by the practical, unremarkable wardrobe that reflected my practical, unremarkable life. Nothing made me feel like the fire starter. That girl was long gone, replaced by a woman who bought clothes for durability rather than beauty, who considered an evening hemming pants a wild Saturday night. I was about to call and cancel when my eye caught a flash of emerald at the back of my closet. The dress I'd bought 3 years ago for a museum fundraiser and never worn again. A simple sheath in deep green silk, elegant but not showy. I'd splurged on it because the color exactly matched the one Robert had always said brought out the gold flecks in my eyes. I pulled it out, weighing the decision. The Oak Room demanded elegance, but my budget had strict limitations. I could wear the dress, but I had no accessories that wouldn't immediately mark me as out of place in such a setting. Then I remembered the small velvet box at the back of my jewelry drawer. Inside was the only valuable piece I owned, a pair of pearl earrings Robert had given me on our 20th anniversary. I'd worn them to his funeral, and never again, unable to bear the memories they evoked. But tonight wasn't about the past, or rather, not about that past. At 7:30, I stood before my mirror, barely recognizing the woman reflected there. The green dress still fit, thankfully. I'd swept my silver-streaked copper hair into a simple updo and applied makeup with a careful hand, enough to brighten my face, but not so much as to look like I was trying too hard. The pearl earrings caught the light when I turned my head, adding a subtle elegance. I wasn't 20 anymore. The lines around my eyes told stories of both laughter and grief. My hands, with their slightly swollen knuckles, revealed decades of painstaking work on delicate art. But for the first time in years, I didn't look at my reflection and see a faded version of a younger self. I saw a woman who had lived, who had loved, who had endured. As I grabbed my one decent handbag and headed for the door, my phone chimed with a text. William again, no doubt, still trying to justify the unjustifiable. I almost ignored it, but something made me check. It wasn't from my son. Looking forward to seeing you, Firestarter. Reservations under my name. Don't be late. We have 50 years to catch up on. The message was unsigned, but it didn't need to be. Only one person had ever called me that name, had ever looked at me, and seen past the shy exterior to the passion beneath. As I stepped outside and hailed a taxi, another splurge I'd regret when the credit card bill came, I felt something long dormant flicker to life inside me. Not quite the blazing confidence of youth, but something steadier, more resilient, a slow burn. The Fairmont Copley Plaza had always been a Boston landmark I admired from afar, one of those places that existed in a parallel universe where people thought nothing of spending on one dinner what I budgeted for a month of groceries. As the taxi pulled up to the entrance, I fought the urge to ask the driver to keep going, to take me back to the safety of my modest apartment and predictable life. The Oak Room is just inside. To your right, ma'am, the doorman said as he helped me from the car, his practiced smile revealing nothing about what he thought of my slightly outdated dress or sensible shoes. I thanked him, squared my shoulders, and walked into the opulent lobby with as much confidence as I could muster. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over marble floors and richly upholstered furniture. Well-dressed patrons moved with the easy assurance of those who have never questioned whether they belong. Following the doorman's directions, I approached the maitre d' station outside the Oak Room. I'm meeting Gabriel Belmire, I said, hating the slight tremor in my voice. The man's demeanor instantly warmed. Ah, yes. Mr. Belmire mentioned you would be joining him. He's already seated. Please, follow me. As we wound through the restaurant, I tried to prepare myself for the moment ahead. 50 years was a long time. The boy I remembered had surely been replaced by a stranger, a man shaped by experiences I knew nothing about. Whatever connection we'd once shared was probably nothing more than a nostalgic fantasy on my part. And then I saw him. He sat at a corner table, partially turned away as he studied the wine list. His hair, once dark as midnight, was now silver, but still thick and slightly unruly. His profile remained strong, the straight nose, the determined chin. Though time had softened the sharp edges of youth, he wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that somehow managed to look both expensive and unpretentious. As if sensing my presence, he looked up. For one breathless moment, we simply stared at each other across the elegant room, half a century collapsing between us. Then he smiled, that same transformative smile that had once made my teenage heart stumble, and rose from his chair. "Ellie," he said as I approached, his voice warm with genuine pleasure. "You came." "I said I would," I replied, suddenly shy. He reached for my hand, then seemed to change his mind and embraced me instead. The scent of him, cedar and something citrusy, enveloped me as his arms briefly tightened around my shoulders. "You look beautiful," he said as he drew back, his eyes still that remarkable shade of amber, taking me in. "That color always did suit you." "You remember what colors I wore 50 years ago?" I asked, settling into the chair he held for me. His smile turned mischievous. "I remember everything about you, Firestarter, including how that particular shade of green brings out the gold in your eyes." The waiter appeared with a bottle of wine, saving me from having to respond to this unexpected flirtation. Gabriel nodded his approval after tasting it, and soon crystal glasses were filled with a ruby-red liquid that caught the light like liquid garnets. "To found treasures," Gabriel said, raising his glass. I touched mine to his, the crystal producing a perfect, bell-like chime. "To dreams realized," I countered, nodding slightly toward our surroundings. He laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "You always did cut straight to the heart of things." "Yes, I suppose I did manage to realize that particular dream, though it took longer than my youthful self imagined." "Tell me how it happened," I said, genuinely curious. "The last I knew, your family had lost almost everything." Gabriel took a sip of his wine, his expression turning reflective. "We had. Father's investments went south, and there was nothing left but the decaying chateau, which no one would buy because of the restoration costs." He shook his head slightly. "When they sent me to my uncle in Provence, I was devastated, not just because I was leaving you, but because I thought I'd never see the estate again." The mention of our separation hung briefly in the air between us, an old wound neither of us was quite ready to probe. "But clearly that wasn't the end of the story," I prompted gently. "No," he agreed. "My uncle turned out to be the best thing that could have happened to me. He owned vineyards, but his real passion was restoring old properties around the Luberon. He taught me everything: masonry, carpentry, the business side of historic renovation. By the time I was 30, we were partners." "And the chateau?" Gabriel's eyes lit with remembered triumph. "We bought it back 20 years ago. It had passed through several owners, each more neglectful than the last. The price was steep even in its condition, but I'd been saving for that specific purpose my entire adult life." His passion, as he described the painstaking, decade-long restoration, reminded me so much of the boy he'd been, the one who could see beauty where others saw only decay, who believed that what was broken could be made whole again. "You've created something remarkable," I said sincerely. "From what I saw on the website, it's even more magnificent than your sketches imagined." A shadow crossed his face. "It's successful, certainly. Profitable, prestigious." He took another sip of wine. "But sometimes I wonder if in making it so exclusive, I've lost something of what I originally loved about the place." I thought of William and Lexi, of being deemed unworthy of entry into the very place Gabriel and I had once roamed freely, mud on our shoes and dreams in our hearts. "It seems very restrictive now," I said carefully. His gaze sharpened. "Which brings us to why you won't be attending your son's wedding at my chateau. What happened, Ellie?" The gentleness in his voice nearly undid me. I took a steadying breath and told him everything. William's rise in finance, his relationship with status-obsessed Lexi, the engagement party where I learned I wasn't welcome at their wedding. "She actually said you were too poor to be there." Gabriel's expression had darkened with each detail, but at this, genuine anger flashed in his eyes. "At my chateau? Apparently the venue has a certain aesthetic," I said, trying to keep the bitterness from my voice. "One that doesn't include art restorers in department store dresses." "That's absurd," he said flatly. "The Chateau Belmer I envisioned was never about exclusivity based on wealth. It was about preserving history, about honoring craftsmanship and beauty." He reached across the table, covering my hand with his. "Ellie, you belong there more than anyone. You were part of its story from the beginning." The warmth of his hand on mine sent a tremor through me that had nothing to do with wine or memories. "It doesn't matter now," I said. "William made his choice. He stood there and let her uninvite me from his wedding." "It matters to me," Gabriel said firmly. No one gets to tell Eleanor Caldwell she doesn't belong in my home, especially not some social climbing princess who probably thinks art restoration involves changing a light bulb in a museum. Despite everything, I laughed at his indignation. Lexi would be horrified to know I'm having dinner with the owner of her precious venue. Then maybe we should horrify her, Gabriel said, a gleam in his eye that I remembered all too well, the look that had preceded many of our more reckless teenage adventures. What do you mean? He leaned forward, his voice dropping conspiratorially. Come to the wedding, Ellie, as my personal guest. My heart skipped. I couldn't possibly. You absolutely could, he insisted. They don't know our connection, do they? No, I admitted. The invitation came through Lexi's family connections. I doubt they have any idea I've ever even heard of Chateau Bellemare before. Perfect. His smile turned wolfish. Imagine their faces when they realize that the woman they deemed unworthy is personal friends with the owner. The idea was tempting, deliciously, wickedly tempting, but I shook my head. It would create a scene, ruin William's day. William ruined his own day when he chose status over his mother, Gabriel said bluntly. Then, seeing my expression, he softened. But I understand. You're protecting him even now. He's still my son, I said simply. Gabriel nodded, squeezing my hand before releasing it. Your loyalty has always been your most admirable quality, Firestarter, and your most frustrating. The waiter arrived with our appetizers, momentarily diverting the conversation. As we sampled delicate scallops and artfully arranged salads, Gabriel skillfully guided us to lighter topics. My restoration work, his travels, books we'd read, music we loved. It was surprisingly easy, as if the decades between us were inconsequential, as if we were picking up a conversation only briefly interrupted. By the time dessert arrived, a decadent chocolate creation I would normally never indulge in, I felt more alive than I had in years. Gabriel Bellemare still looked at me as if I mattered, still listened as if my thoughts were worthy of his complete attention. In his eyes, I wasn't an aging woman in a dated dress. I was still Ellie, the Firestarter, the girl who had once matched his dreams with her own fierce determination. I have a confession, he said as our coffee was served. I do have an ulterior motive for wanting to see you again after all these years. My heart sank a little. Here it came. The business proposition, the revelation that this evening was about more than reconnection. Oh, I managed, trying to keep my tone light. The chateau has an art collection, he said. Paintings that have been in storage since my grandfather's time. They're in terrible condition. Neglect, improper storage, some water damage. I've been looking for the right conservator to assess and restore them. And you thought of me? I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. Who else? He asked simply. The girl who could spend hours explaining why the light in a Vermeer mattered. Who cried when we found that damaged Corot in my family's attic. Of course I thought of you. The fact that he remembered those details, small moments I'd assumed were significant only to me, left me momentarily speechless. I don't know what to say. I finally managed. Say you'll at least come look at them, he urged. Next weekend. I'll send a car to bring you to the chateau. No obligation. Just give me your professional opinion. I hesitated. Going to the chateau meant potentially running into William or Lexi during their planning visits. It meant seeing the place that had featured in so many of my youthful dreams, now transformed into something I might not recognize. But it also meant spending more time with Gabriel, whose presence had reawakened something in me I'd thought long dead. I'll think about it, I promised. His smile told me he knew it was as good as a yes. I floated home that night, buoyed by wine, nostalgia, and something dangerous that felt suspiciously like hope. Gabriel and I had exchanged phone numbers with promises to arrange details for my visit to the chateau. As the taxi pulled away from the Fairmont, I caught a final glimpse of him standing beneath the golden glow of the entrance, watching to ensure I got safely on my way. The sight stirred something forgotten in my chest. Sunday morning brought reality crashing back. 3 messages from William, each more insistent than the last, culminating in, "Mom, this is ridiculous. We need to talk about the wedding. Coming by at 2. I sighed, the pleasant haze of the previous evening dissipating. Part of me wanted to be conveniently absent when he arrived, but that would only delay the inevitable. Besides, I had raised my son to face difficult conversations head-on. I could hardly do less myself. At precisely 2 o'clock, William's distinctive knock sounded at my door. When I opened it, I was startled by his appearance. his usually immaculate hair slightly disheveled, dark circles shadowing his eyes. "You look terrible," I said, moving aside to let him in. "Thanks," he replied dryly. "That's what happens when your mother disappears and ignores your calls for a week." "I didn't disappear. I've been right here, working." He glanced at my easel where the half-restored millet waited. "Is that what's so important you couldn't answer your phone? Another dusty painting no one cares about?" The casual dismissal of my work that had put him through college, stung more than I cared to admit. "Someone cares," I said evenly. "The curator who's been trying to authenticate it for years, the museum that wants to include it in their American Impressionism exhibit, the students who will learn from seeing it properly restored." William had the grace to look slightly abashed. "I didn't mean it like that." "Yes, you did." I gestured toward the sofa. "Sit down. Say what you came to say." He remained standing. "Lexi told me what happened at the engagement party." "Did she?" I raised an eyebrow. "And what version did she share? The one where she told me I was too poor and shabby to attend your wedding? Or some alternate reality where I was the unreasonable one? She said you misunderstood her concerns about the venue's requirements." I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. "That's creative. Did she mention that you stood there and let her uninvite me? That you confirmed the venue requirements were more important than having your mother at your wedding? It's complicated, Mom." He raked a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father it momentarily softened my anger. "Lexi's family secured the venue. Her father's firm represents the owner. There are expectations." "Yes, you've mentioned these mysterious expectations before. Forgive me if I don't find them compelling enough to justify excluding the woman who raised you." William paced my small living room, frustration evident in every line of his body. "You don't understand the world I'm in now. Every connection matters. Every impression counts. And I make the wrong impression." "In that setting? Yes!" he burst out. "I'm sorry if that hurts you, but it's the truth. Chateau Belmer isn't the Knights of Columbus Hall. It's the most exclusive venue in New England." I thought of Gabriel's face when I'd told him about being deemed unworthy of his chateau, the genuine anger that had flashed in his amber eyes. I almost smiled at the irony. "Tell me about this venue," I said instead, keeping my tone neutral. "How did Lexi's family secure it?" William seemed relieved by the change in direction. "Her father's law firm represents the owner, some European hospitality magnate named Belmer. Apparently he almost never allows weddings there, but he made an exception as a favor to Lexi's father." "How generous of him," I murmured. "It's a huge deal, Mom. People have been trying to book it for years. Celebrities, politicians, they've all been turned down. But we got it." Pride swelled in his voice. "Do you have any idea what that means for my standing at the firm? For our social position?" "I'm beginning to understand," I said quietly. "And this position is worth more to you than having your mother present on your wedding day." His expression hardened. "You're being deliberately difficult. This isn't about choosing between you and some abstract position. It's about making one small accommodation for the sake of my future." "Small?" I echoed. "You consider excluding me from your wedding a small accommodation? You could be part of other celebrations," he offered, the same empty promise he'd made before. "The rehearsal dinner is at a more suitable venue. You could attend that." I studied my son. This stranger who looked like the boy I'd raised, but spoke with the voice of someone I didn't recognize. When had this happened? When had status and appearances become more important to him than loyalty and love? "No," I said finally. "No what?" "No, I won't attend your rehearsal dinner. No, I won't pretend it's acceptable for you to exclude me from your wedding. No, I won't make this easier for you." "Mom?" "William, listen to me carefully," I interrupted, a new steadiness in my voice. "You are making a choice here. I can't stop you, but I won't pretend it isn't happening. If you go through with this wedding without me present, you are sending a clear message about what matters to you, about who matters to you." "That's not fair," he protested. "You're the one giving ultimatums. I'm stating facts. There's a difference." My phone chimed with a text. I ignored it, but William's eyes darted to where it sat on the coffee table. His expression shifted from frustration to surprise. "Gabriel Belmer?" he read from the screen notification. "Why is Gabriel Belmer texting you?" I cursed myself for not turning off notifications. "That's none of your concern." William snatched up my phone before I could stop him. Car confirmed for Saturday at 10 a.m. Looking forward to showing you the chateau and the art collection. Dinner after? G. He looked up, confusion written across his face. Mom, why is the owner of Chateau Belmer texting you about dinner? I took my phone back, refusing to be rattled. Gabriel is an old friend. We reconnected recently. An old friend, William repeated slowly. You know Gabriel Belmer personally? The Gabriel Belmer? Since we were children, yes. He stared at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking in tongues. That's impossible. He's European hospitality magnate, I supplied dryly. Before that, he was just Gabe, a boy with big dreams and mud on his shoes who used to explore the grounds of his family's crumbling estate with me every summer. William sank onto the sofa, visibly processing this information. And you're going to the chateau on Saturday? To see him? He's asked me to assess some paintings from his family collection, professionally. A calculation was clearly happening behind my son's eyes, one that had nothing to do with maternal affection and everything to do with advantage. Why didn't you tell me you knew him? This changes everything. Does it? I asked coolly. Does it make me less poor, less embarrassing, more worthy of attending your wedding? He had the decency to flush. Mom, be reasonable. If you know the owner personally, of course you can attend. Lexi will understand. Lexi will understand that I'm suddenly useful, I corrected him. That I have a connection she wants to exploit. That doesn't interest me. You're being ridiculous. This is a simple solution to our problem. Our problem, I repeated. The problem being that my son and his fiancée are ashamed of me unless I can provide them with social currency. William stood abruptly. I don't know why I bothered coming here. You clearly want to be difficult. No, I said, suddenly tired. I want to be valued for who I am, not for who I know. I want my son to stand up for me, not because I might have useful connections, but because I'm his mother and I deserve his respect. This isn't getting us anywhere, he muttered, heading for the door. I let him go, watching as he paused with his hand on the doorknob. Are you really going to the chateau on Saturday? He asked, not turning around. Yes. Will you mention me to Belmer? The naked ambition in his question broke my heart anew. Goodbye, William. After he left, I picked up my phone and reread Gabriel's message. The excitement I'd felt at the prospect of seeing him again had been tarnished by the interaction with my son, but not extinguished. Something new was unfolding in my life, something unexpected and potentially wonderful. I refused to let William's choices dim that possibility. I typed a quick reply, looking forward to it, and yes, to dinner. E. Within moments, a response appeared. Excellent. Wear comfortable shoes. We have a lot of ground to cover, Firestarter. The simple message brought a smile to my face despite everything. Gabriel still saw me, the real me, not just what I could do for him or how I might appear to others. As I returned to my work on the millet, carefully removing decades of grime to reveal the luminous colors beneath, I couldn't help but see it as a metaphor for what was happening in my own life. Sometimes what appeared faded and forgotten needed only the right touch to reveal its enduring beauty. And sometimes the most unexpected second chances came disguised as heartbreak. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of crisp spring day that seemed designed for new beginnings. I'd barely slept, alternating between anticipation about seeing Gabriel again and anxiety about returning to the place that had featured so prominently in my youthful dreams, now transformed into a symbol of the exclusivity that had been used to reject me. At precisely 10 o'clock, a sleek black car pulled up outside my apartment building. The driver, a polite young man named Thomas, opened the door for me with a respectful, "Good morning, Ms. Winters. Mr. Belmer is looking forward to your visit." The drive to Connecticut took just over 2 hours, during which I alternated between nervous anticipation and attempts to distract myself by watching the landscape transition from urban sprawl to affluent suburbs to the rolling countryside that had always characterized this part of New England. When we finally turned onto a tree-lined drive, a familiar tightness gripped my chest, the same feeling I'd experienced as a girl, approaching this place that had always seemed magical to me. The trees parted to reveal Chateau Belmer, and I gasped despite myself. Gabriel's restoration had transformed the once crumbling structure into something that straddled the line between historical authenticity and fairy tale fantasy. The limestone gleamed golden in the midday sun, the slate roof had been meticulously restored, and the gardens, once wild and overgrown, now displayed a manicured elegance that would have been at home in the Loire Valley. As the car pulled up to the main entrance, I spotted Gabriel waiting on the steps. He wore casual clothes, well-cut jeans, and a light sweater that softened his imposing height. When he smiled at the sight of me, years fell away from his face, revealing the boy I'd once known beneath the successful man he'd become. "You came," he said, as he opened my car door, the same greeting he'd used at the restaurant, as if some part of him had feared I might change my mind. "I said I would," I replied, the familiar exchange settling something in me. He offered his arm with a courtly gesture that was half teasing, half sincere. "Welcome back to Chateau Belmer, Firestarter." As we walked through the grand entrance hall, I tried to reconcile my memories of the place with its current incarnation. The dusty, debris-strewn floors had been replaced with gleaming marble. The peeling wallpaper and water-stained ceilings were now adorned with meticulous plasterwork and subtle gold leaf. Yet despite the transformation, there was something in the quality of light, in the proportions of the rooms, that remained essentially unchanged. "What do you think?" Gabriel asked, watching my face closely. "It's magnificent," I said honestly. "You've honored the original vision while making it your own. Your grandfather would be proud." His expression softened at the mention of his grandfather, who had shown us both such kindness during those long-ago summers. I thought of him often during the restoration. "And of you." "Me? You were the only one who ever really understood what this place could be," he said simply. "Who saw past what it was to what it might become." Before I could respond to this unexpectedly personal admission, he gestured toward a sweeping staircase. "The paintings are in the East Wing Gallery. I had them moved from storage last week." The gallery was a long, light-filled room with tall windows overlooking what had once been the Rose Garden. A dozen paintings in varying states of distress had been arranged on easels, with proper conservation lighting installed above each one. "You've been preparing for this," I observed, touched by the effort he'd made. Gabriel shrugged, looking almost embarrassed. "I wanted to create proper working conditions for your assessment. Too many collectors expect conservators to work miracles in inadequate spaces." I approached the first painting, a dusty landscape that showed promising brushwork beneath years of neglect. "You remembered?" "I remember everything about you, Ellie," he said quietly, "including how particular you were about proper lighting even at 17. For the next several hours, I lost myself in the examination of the collection. Most were 19th century works by lesser-known French and American artists, though 2 showed potential to be significant finds once properly cleaned and restored. Gabriel watched as I made notes, occasionally asking insightful questions that revealed his own deep knowledge of art history. "This one," I said finally, pointing to a small, darkened canvas that depicted a young woman reading by a window. "If I'm right, this could be a Mary Cassatt from her early Paris period. The composition, the brushwork, it's distinctive even beneath the discolored varnish." Gabriel stepped closer, studying the painting with new interest. "How much would a Cassatt be worth, if authenticated?" "Depending on the quality and subject, anywhere from $500,000 to several million," I replied. "But authentication would require significant restoration work first, which you could do." His tone was careful, professional, but his eyes held something more personal. "Yes," I admitted, "though it would take time. All of these would, particularly the Cassatt and that possible Corot landscape." He smiled, a hint of boyish excitement breaking through his composed exterior. "Time is something I can offer, along with proper working conditions and whatever materials you require." I hesitated, the professional opportunity warring with personal complications. "Gabriel, I should tell you, my son's wedding is scheduled here in less than 3 weeks. If I were to work on these paintings, you might encounter the very people who deemed you unworthy of entering my home," he finished for me, his expression hardening slightly. "I'm aware of the timing. It would be awkward." Gabriel was quiet for a moment, studying the Cassatt, rather than looking at me. "What if it wasn't?" "Wasn't what?" "Awkward." Now he turned to face me fully. "What if, instead of you accidentally encountering them, we controlled the narrative?" A thread of unease wound through me. "What are you suggesting?" "Nothing manipulative," he assured me, reading my expression. "Simply that we acknowledge the connection openly. You're here as my guest and as a respected conservator, assessing my family's collection. If your son and his fiancée happen to visit during wedding preparations, we greet them politely. professionally. And when they inevitably ask how we know each other, Gabriel's smile turned mischievous. We tell the truth, that we were childhood friends who recently reconnected, that I've admired your work for years and am delighted to have secured your professional services. Put that way, it sounded reasonable, even dignified. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more behind Gabriel's suggestion, something that had less to do with professional courtesy and more to do with the way his eyes lingered on my face when he thought I wasn't looking. I'll consider it, I said finally. The collection certainly deserves proper attention. Excellent. He glanced at his watch. And now I believe I promised you dinner. But first, there's something else I'd like to show you. Gabriel led me through a series of elegantly appointed rooms, each more impressive than the last, until we reached a small, unassuming door partially hidden behind a tapestry. He produced an old-fashioned key from his pocket and unlocked it, revealing a narrow spiral staircase. Where are we going? I asked, intrigued despite myself. You'll see. His eyes held that familiar gleam of mischief. Do you trust me, Firestarter? The question seemed to encompass far more than this moment. This staircase. Did I trust him with my professional reputation? With my complicated family situation? With my heart, which had begun to stir in ways I'd thought impossible after Robert's death? Yes, I said simply. I trust you. The staircase led to a small octagonal room at the top of one of the chateau's towers. Unlike the rest of the meticulously restored building, this space remained largely unchanged from our youth. The same worn window seats, the same faded blue wallpaper, even the same uneven floorboards that creaked beneath our feet. You kept it, I whispered, overcome with unexpected emotion. Just as it was. Our place, Gabriel confirmed softly. I couldn't bring myself to change it. I moved to the window, gazing out at the view that had captivated us as teenagers, rolling hills, the distant shimmer of the lake, the old oak tree we had climbed countless times. From this height, even the immaculately landscaped gardens retained something of their former wildness. I come up here sometimes, Gabriel admitted, joining me at the window, when the pressure of running this place becomes too much, when I need to remember why I wanted it in the first place. And why was that? I asked, though I thought I already knew. His gaze, when it met mine, held decades of unspoken feelings, because it was where I was happiest, where I was most myself, with you. The simple declaration hung in the air between us, too honest to dismiss, too profound to acknowledge lightly. Gabe, I began, not sure what I intended to say. You don't have to respond to that, he said quickly. I didn't show you this place to pressure you or to make declarations. I just wanted you to know that not everything has changed, that some things remain sacred. The sincerity in his voice touched something deep within me, a place that had been dormant for so long I'd almost forgotten it existed. Without thinking, I reached for his hand, lacing my fingers through his. Thank you for remembering, I said softly, for keeping this part of us unchanged. His fingers tightened around mine, warm and solid and real. Some things are worth preserving exactly as they were, Ellie. Some connections don't need restoration, just recognition. As we stood there, hands joined, looking out at the view that had witnessed our youthful dreams, I felt a sense of homecoming unlike anything I'd experienced in years. Not the chateau itself, magnificent as it was, but this connection, this understanding, this recognition of who we had been to each other and who we might still be. Now, Gabriel said finally, reluctantly releasing my hand, about that dinner I promised you. Dinner was served in a small, private dining room that managed to feel intimate despite the grandeur of its 18th century paneling and crystal chandelier. Gabriel had arranged for his chef to prepare a meal that somehow balanced luxury with comfort, dishes that celebrated the finest ingredients without intimidating pretension. Over poached salmon and a wine Gabriel insisted paired perfectly. Our conversation flowed from art to travel to books we'd loved, occasionally dipping into memories of our shared past, but never lingering there too long. It was as if we both understood that what was happening between us now was too fragile, too precious to risk by dwelling too much on what might have been. I should head back to Boston soon, I said reluctantly as we finished dessert, a perfect chocolate soufflé that would have been worth the trip alone. It's getting late. Stay, Gabriel said, then immediately clarified. The chateau has a dozen guest suites. You could have a proper look at the collection tomorrow in daylight, perhaps begin planning the restoration project. The temptation was powerful. A night in this magical place, waking to continue exploring both the art and this rekindled connection with Gabriel, but practicality asserted itself. I didn't bring anything with me, I pointed out. No change of clothes, no toiletries, all easily resolved, he countered. The chateau keeps guest amenities for exactly this situation. As for clothes, surely you can survive one day in what you're wearing. His eagerness to extend our time together was both flattering and concerning. Gabe, I'm not sure if... A commotion in the hallway interrupted us. Raised voices, one of which I recognized with a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. I don't care if he's at dinner. This is about my wedding, and I demand to speak with him immediately. Lexi's imperious tone carried clearly through the heavy oak door. Gabriel's expression darkened as he caught my eye. Your future daughter-in-law, I presume? He asked dryly. Before I could respond, the door burst open to reveal Lexi, resplendent in what appeared to be a designer evening outfit, despite the relatively early hour. Behind her stood a harried-looking staff member, and a few steps further back, William, his expression a mix of embarrassment and alarm. Mr. Belmere, I apologize for interrupting your dinner, but there's been a crucial misunderstanding about our wedding arrange, Lexi began, then froze as her gaze landed on me. What are you doing here? The naked shock in her voice would have been comical if it weren't so insulting. William stepped forward, his eyes darting between Gabriel and me with dawning comprehension. Mom? He said weakly. What's going on? Gabriel rose from his chair with deliberate grace, his posture suddenly embodying every inch of his position as lord of this domain. Ms. Thornfield, Mr. Winters, this is an unexpected pleasure. His tone made it clear it was anything but. You know my mother? William asked, addressing Gabriel while casting bewildered glances my way. Know her? Gabriel's smile was dangerously pleasant. Eleanor and I have been friends for over 50 years. In fact, she's here assessing my family's art collection for a major restoration project. Lexi's perfect features contorted with confusion. That's impossible. She's just a... She caught herself, but not before the dismissal was clear to everyone in the room. A highly respected art conservator whose work has been featured in museums across New England, Gabriel finished smoothly. Yes, I'm quite fortunate to have secured her services. I stood, gathering what dignity I could. William, Alexandra, what a surprise to see you here. We had an appointment to discuss final wedding arrangements, William said, his businessman's composure returning despite the shock. But clearly, we're interrupting something. Nonsense, Gabriel said. Join us for a digestive. I believe there are some matters we should discuss regarding your upcoming celebration. Gabe, I murmured, a warning note in my voice. This confrontation was precisely what I'd hoped to avoid. He caught my eye, and something in his expression softened. Trust me, he said quietly. Lexi had recovered enough to switch tactics, her face transforming into a mask of charm as she extended her hand to Gabriel. Mr. Belmere, it's such an honor to finally meet you in person. My father speaks so highly of you. Does he? Gabriel replied, taking her hand briefly. How interesting, considering we've spoken exactly twice, once when he inquired about hosting your wedding here, and once when I agreed as a professional courtesy. Color rose in Lexi's cheeks at this puncturing of her implied intimacy with him. William stepped forward, clearly trying to salvage the situation. We're tremendously grateful for your generosity in allowing us to use the chateau, Mr. Belmere. It means a great deal to us. So I gather, Gabriel replied. Though I confess I'm curious about something, Mr. Winters. Why would a man choose to hold his wedding at a venue where his own mother wasn't welcome? The direct question hung in the air like a thunderclap. William blanched, while Lexi's eyes narrowed dangerously. There seems to have been a misunderstanding, she began. Has there? Gabriel raised an eyebrow. Because Eleanor tells me you quite explicitly uninvited her from the wedding. Something about her being too poor to be here. That's not exactly, William started. It's precisely what happened, I interrupted, finding my voice at last. And you stood there and let it happen, William. My son had the grace to look ashamed. Lexi, however, quickly recovered her composure. Mr. Belmere, I'm sure my future mother-in-law has exaggerated what was merely a practical discussion about venue requirements. We have a very specific vision for our wedding, and my chateau has only one requirement for guests, Ms. Thornfield. Gabriel cut in, his voice deceptively gentle. They must be invited by people I respect. The implication was unmistakable. Lexi flushed crimson, while William looked increasingly uncomfortable. Perhaps we should reschedule our meeting, he suggested, clearly desperate to escape the tension. Actually, I believe we should clarify the situation immediately, Gabriel countered. Your wedding is in less than 3 weeks. There's no time to waste on misunderstandings. He turned to face me, his expression softening. Eleanor, I want to be clear that you are not only welcome at Chateau Belmer for this or any event, but that your presence would honor this house and its history. The genuine warmth in his voice threatened to undo me. Thank you, Gabriel. He turned back to the stunned couple. Now, Mr. Winters, Ms. Thornfield, you have a choice to make. You can either ensure that Eleanor is treated with the respect she deserves as mother of the groom and as my personal friend, or you can find another venue for your wedding. I'm sure with your connections, 3 weeks is plenty of time to secure an alternate location. You can't be serious, Lexi sputtered. The invitations have gone out. Everyone knows we're getting married here. I'm entirely serious, Gabriel replied calmly. Eleanor's presence is non-negotiable. The choice is yours. William, to his credit, recognized the immovable object before him. Of course my mother will be at the wedding, he said quickly, throwing Lexi a warning glance. There was never any question of that. Excellent, Gabriel smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Then I believe our business is concluded for this evening. I'll have my event coordinator contact you tomorrow to ensure Eleanor receives a proper invitation and is included in all remaining preparations. Lexi looked as though she might protest further, but William placed a restraining hand on her arm. Thank you for your time, Mr. Belmer. Mom, can we talk privately for a moment? I glanced at Gabriel, who nodded almost imperceptibly. I'll wait for you in the library, he said, before turning to Lexi with perfect, devastating courtesy. Ms. Thornfield, I believe my staff can show you to the main salon while your fiancé and his mother speak. Lexi had no choice but to allow herself to be escorted from the room, though the look she threw me over her shoulder promised this wasn't over. When we were alone, William and I regarded each other in uncomfortable silence. You and Gabriel Belmer, he finally said. How long has this been going on? That's your first question? I asked incredulously. Not, Mom. I'm sorry for allowing my fiancé to humiliate you. He had the grace to look ashamed. I'm sorry. I truly am. I got caught up in what this wedding means for my career, for our future. I lost sight of what matters. And what does matter, William? I asked quietly. Because from where I stand, it looks like appearances and connections matter more to you than basic human decency. That's not fair, he protested, but without his earlier conviction. I love you, Mom. I always have. I didn't know how to navigate between you and Lexi, between my past and my future. Your past, I repeated. Is that how you see me? As something to be left behind? He flinched. I didn't mean it like that. I studied my son's face, so like his father's, yet somehow harder around the edges. When had that happened? When had ambition begun to chip away at the compassionate boy I'd raised? William, I won't be a prop at your wedding, I said finally. Either I'm fully acknowledged as your mother, treated with respect by both you and Lexi, or I won't attend at all, regardless of Gabriel's ultimatum. Of course, he said quickly. I want you there, Mom. I always did. Did you? I challenged. Because your silence when Lexi uninvited me suggested otherwise. He looked away, unable to maintain eye contact. I made a mistake. A terrible one. Please give me a chance to make it right. Despite everything, he was still my son. Still the boy who had once looked at me as if I hung the moon. I sighed, feeling suddenly very tired. We'll see, I said, neither forgiving nor condemning. Actions speak louder than words, William. Remember that. He nodded, clearly recognizing it was the best he could hope for at the moment. And Gabriel Belmer? He asked again. You two seem close. We're old friends reconnecting, I replied, unwilling to discuss the complicated emotions stirring between Gabriel and me. Nothing more. William's expression suggested he didn't quite believe me, but he was wise enough not to press. I should go deal with Lexi. She's going to be difficult about this. I imagined so, I agreed, unable to muster much sympathy. Good luck with that. As he turned to leave, I called after him. William, one more thing. He paused at the door. Yes? The next time you or Lexi think someone is too poor to belong somewhere, Remember this moment. Remember how quickly fortunes can change, how easily assumptions can be shattered. His face registered the lesson, and for the first time that evening, I saw a flash of the thoughtful boy he had once been. I will, Mom. I promise. After he left, I remained in the dining room, processing what had just happened. Gabriel had defended me, had essentially forced William and Lexi to include me in their wedding. It was a victory of sorts, but it left me wondering, was I now welcome because of my own worth, or merely because of my connection to Gabriel Belmire? And was that any better than being excluded because I lacked the right pedigree? I found Gabriel in the library as promised, standing before a crackling fire with a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. The room, lined with leather-bound volumes and accented with deep green velvet furnishings, suited him. Elegant but substantial, refined but not without warmth. That went well, he said as I entered, a wry smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Did it? I moved to stand beside him at the fireplace. I'm not sure humiliating my son and his fiancée was the ideal solution. They humiliated themselves, he countered, offering me a second glass he'd already poured. I merely created circumstances where they had to confront the consequences of their actions. I accepted the whiskey, taking a small sip. The liquid burned pleasantly down my throat, warming me from within. It's complicated, Gabriel. William is still my son, whatever his failings. And Lexi is the woman he's chosen to marry, I said simply. Which means, for better or worse, she's about to become family. Gabriel studied me over the rim of his glass. Your capacity for forgiveness is either saintly or masochistic. I haven't decided which. The observation wasn't entirely kind, but it wasn't wrong either. Perhaps a bit of both, I admitted, though I haven't actually forgiven them yet. I've merely acknowledged reality. The reality being that you'll attend their wedding here, be polite to the woman who tried to exclude you, and generally take the high road? Something like that. He shook his head slightly. You haven't changed, Firestarter, still putting everyone else's needs before your own. The criticism stung, partly because it echoed doubts I'd harbored myself. That's not entirely fair, isn't it? Gabriel moved closer, his gaze intent. You spent your life ensuring William had every opportunity, even at your own expense. You worked jobs beneath your talent because they allowed you to be there for him. You lived modestly so he could have advantages you never did. That's what parents do, I said defensively. They sacrifice for their children. To a point, he agreed. But sacrifice becomes self-erasure when it's not balanced with self-respect. He set his glass down on the mantel, his expression softening. When do you get to put Eleanor first, Ellie? When do your dreams matter as much as everyone else's? His question penetrated defenses I hadn't realized I'd built. When, indeed. Even my career choices had been governed by what worked for others. Restoration projects I could do while raising William alone, positions that wouldn't require relocation or extensive travel, fees adjusted to what small museums could afford rather than what my expertise was worth. I don't know, I admitted quietly. I'm not sure I remember how. Gabriel reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear with a gentleness that made my breath catch. Then perhaps it's time to remember. The moment stretched between us, charged with possibilities. His hand lingered near my face, not quite touching but close enough that I could feel its warmth. For an instant, I thought he might kiss me, and more surprisingly, I realized I wanted him to. Instead, he stepped back, creating a small but significant distance between us. You should stay tonight, he said, his voice rougher than before. It's late, and the drive back to Boston is long. I meant what I said about the guest suites. The sensible part of me knew I should decline, should maintain boundaries and distance while I processed the evening's events. But another part, a part that had been silent for too long, wanted to stay, wanted to see where this reconnection might lead. All right, I said. Thank you. His smile was worth the momentary abandonment of practicality. I'll have Thomas bring your things to the Blue Suite. It has the best view of the sunrise. The Blue Suite proved to be a spacious room with a canopied bed, antique furnishings, and windows that indeed promised a spectacular view of the morning sun. A staff member had already delivered a robe, toiletries, and other necessities. The luxury was subtle but unmistakable. Fine linens, plush towels, products that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I stood at the window, gazing out at the moonlit grounds, wondering at the strange turn my life had taken. A week ago, I'd been uninvited from my son's wedding at this very chateau. Now I was staying here as the personal guest of its owner, with whom I shared a connection that grew more complicated by the hour. A soft knock at the door interrupted my reflections. When I opened it, Gabriel stood there, having changed from his dinner clothes into more casual attire, a simple shirt and trousers that somehow made him look younger, more like the boy I'd once known. "I wanted to make sure you had everything you need," he said. "The room is lovely," I assured him. "Perfect, really." He nodded, seeming almost nervous, a stark contrast to the commanding presence he'd projected during the confrontation with William and Lexi. "Good, that's good." We stood awkwardly for a moment, neither quite ready to say goodnight, neither brave enough to say what we were actually thinking. "Would you like to come in?" I finally asked. "Just to talk," I added hastily. He hesitated, then shook his head. "Better not. I meant what I said earlier, Ellie, about you putting yourself first. I don't want to complicate things for you when you're already dealing with so much." His consideration touched me deeply. How long had it been since someone had prioritized my emotional well-being? "Thank you," I said softly, "for everything tonight, for defending me, for offering me this project, for seeing me." "I've always seen you," he replied simply, "even when you couldn't see yourself." After he left, I sat on the edge of the luxurious bed, turning his words over in my mind. Had I lost sight of myself somewhere along the way? Had I become so accustomed to being defined by my relationships to others, mother, widow, employee, that I'd forgotten who Eleanor was at her core? The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows, painting the room in a golden glow that seemed almost magical. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was, the canopied bed and elegant surroundings so far removed from my modest apartment. Then it all came flooding back. The confrontation, Gabriel's defense of me, the charged moment by the fireplace. After dressing in yesterday's clothes and making myself as presentable as possible, I made my way downstairs, following the scent of coffee to a sunny breakfast room where Gabriel sat reading a newspaper. "Good morning," he said, looking up with a smile that made my heart do something ridiculous and teenaged in my chest. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in years," I admitted, accepting the cup of coffee he poured for me. "There's something about this place. It has that effect on people," he agreed. "Or perhaps it's just the 1,000 thread count sheets." I laughed, grateful for the lightening of the mood. Those certainly didn't hurt. Over breakfast, fresh pastries, fruit, and eggs prepared to perfection, we discussed the art collection and the potential restoration project. Gabriel outlined a proposal that was almost too good to be true. I would work at the chateau 3 days a week, with accommodations provided and a fee that made me choke slightly on my coffee when he mentioned the figure. "That's far too generous," I protested. "It's the market rate for someone of your expertise," he countered, "possibly even below it." "I've done my research, Ellie, but the accommodations are sitting empty most of the time anyway," he pointed out. "The chateau has 12 guest suites that are only fully occupied during events. You'd be doing me a favor by using one of them." I studied him suspiciously. "Are you creating a position for me out of pity?" His expression turned serious. "I would never insult you that way. The collection genuinely needs restoration, and you're genuinely qualified to do it. The timing is convenient, perhaps, but the need is real." I wanted to believe him. More than that, I wanted to accept his offer, not just for the generous compensation, but for the opportunity to spend more time with him, to explore whatever was developing between us. "I'll consider it," I said finally. "But I need to be clear about something, Gabriel." "What's that?" "If I accept this project, it has to be on professional terms. I won't be a charity case or a kept woman." He winced slightly at the phrase. "Is that what you think I'm offering?" "I don't know what you're offering," I admitted. "Beyond the professional arrangement, I mean." Gabriel set down his coffee cup, his expression thoughtful. "I'm offering a second chance, Ellie, for both of us. A chance to discover who we might be to each other now, without the constraints and expectations that separated us 50 years ago." "And if that discovery leads nowhere?" I asked softly. "If we find we've changed too much, or not enough, then we'll still have reconnected with an old friend, still have shared something valuable." He reached across the table, covering my hand with his. "I'm not asking for promises, Firestarter, just possibilities. Put that way, how could I refuse? The professional opportunity was exceptional, and the personal one, well, that was both terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure." "All right," I said, turning my hand to clasp his. Let's see where this leads. His smile, that same transformative smile that had captivated me as a girl, lit his entire face. I was hoping you'd say that. As we finalized the details of my contract over a second cup of coffee, I felt something shift inside me. A realignment of priorities, a recognition that perhaps Gabriel was right. Perhaps it was time to put Eleanor first, to pursue my own dreams and desires after decades of setting them aside. And perhaps, just perhaps, those dreams and desires might include the man sitting across from me, whose hand still held mine, as if it were something precious, something worth waiting 50 years to reclaim. The 3 weeks leading up to William and Lexi's wedding passed in a blur of activity. True to our agreement, I began working at the chateau 3 days a week, staying in the blue suite during those periods. The rhythm suited me. Intensive work on the collection, particularly the promising cassette, interspersed with time at home to handle my existing clients and prepare for the longer-term transition. News of my association with Chateau Belmer spread quickly through Boston's art conservation community. Suddenly, institutions that had haggled over my modest fees were calling with urgent projects and generous budgets. Former colleagues who had drifted away reconnected with warm congratulations. My phone rang constantly with inquiries from collectors who had previously considered me too small time for their precious artworks. The irony wasn't lost on me. After decades of dedication to my craft, it was my connection to Gabriel Belmer, not my skill or experience, that finally brought professional recognition. I might have resented this if not for Gabriel himself, who took every opportunity to emphasize my expertise to visitors and staff alike. "Eleanor is doing me an enormous favor by taking on this collection," he told a group of hospitality industry executives touring the chateau. "Museums have been trying to secure her services for years." This was a flagrant exaggeration, but his pride in me was so genuine that I couldn't bring myself to correct him. Besides, there was something delicious about watching these powerful men suddenly regard me, a woman they might have overlooked entirely in different circumstances, with newfound respect. As for Gabriel and me, we maintained a careful dance of professional collaboration and personal rediscovery. During working hours, we were colleagues, he deferring to my expertise about the art, I respecting his vision for the chateau. After hours, we were something else. Not quite lovers, we had not yet crossed that threshold, but more than friends, existing in a liminal space charged with possibility. We took evening walks through the gardens, his hand occasionally brushing mine. We shared meals in the small private dining room, talking late into the night about everything and nothing. Once, during a thunderstorm that rattled the chateau's windows, we sat before the library fire, reading aloud from a volume of poetry we'd both loved as teenagers, our voices mingling with the crackling flames and rumbling thunder. These moments were precious precisely because they were unhurried, unburdened by the desperate immediacy of youth. We were rediscovering each other slowly, savoring each revelation like connoisseurs of fine wine. A week before the wedding, the inevitable happened. I encountered Lexi during one of my working days at the chateau. She was there for a final planning meeting with the event coordinator, immaculate in a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Mrs. Winters?" she said coolly when we passed in the grand hallway. "How industrious you look today." I glanced down at my practical work clothes, complete with a smudge of cleaning solution on one sleeve. "Conservation is hands-on work," I replied evenly, "but rewarding. I'm sure." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "William mentioned you'd be staying here until the wedding. How convenient for you." The implication was clear. She thought I was using my connection to Gabriel to insinuate myself into their event. I could have explained that I'd be returning to Boston 2 days before the wedding to give them privacy for the rehearsal dinner, but something in her smug expression stopped me. "Yes, it is convenient," I agreed pleasantly. "Gabriel has been wonderfully accommodating. He's such a dear friend." Her smile faltered slightly. "Yes, well, I hope you're not working too hard. At your age, one has to be careful." "How thoughtful of you to be concerned," I said. "But don't worry. Gabriel ensures I take plenty of breaks. Just last night, we sat up until midnight sharing a lovely bottle of Bordeaux and reminiscing about old times." It was petty, perhaps, to enjoy the flash of uncertainty that crossed her perfect features. But after the humiliation she had inflicted, this small victory felt justified. "How nice," she managed. "If you'll excuse me, I need to check on the floral arrangements." As she walked away, her heels clicking authoritatively on the marble floor, I felt Gabriel's presence behind me. "That looked entertaining," he observed, amusement coloring his voice. I turned to find him leaning against a doorway, arms crossed, eyes twinkling. "Were you eavesdropping, Mr. Belmere?" "Absolutely," he admitted, without a trace of shame. "And I must say, you handled that with remarkable restraint. I half expected you to mention our midnight swim in the lake last weekend. That would have been an outright lie," I pointed out. "We've never gone swimming." "Yet," he added, with a mischievous smile. "The summer's still young, Firestarter." The casual suggestion of a future, of more seasons together, sent a pleasant shiver through me. "You're incorrigible." "So I've been told." He offered his arm with mock formality. "Now, shall we return to the cassette? I believe you were about to reveal whether my family possesses a priceless masterpiece or merely a very nice painting." 2 days before the wedding, true to my plan, I packed my things to return to Boston. Gabriel found me in the blue suite, folding the clothes I'd gradually accumulated over my weeks at the chateau. "You don't have to go," he said from the doorway. "The wedding preparations won't interfere with your work." "It's not about the work," I explained gently. "It's about giving William and Lexi their space. Whatever has happened between us, this is their wedding. I don't want my presence here to create additional tension." Gabriel frowned slightly. "Always putting others first." "Not always," I countered. The old Eleanor would have declined to attend the wedding entirely to avoid causing discomfort. This new version is attending with her head held high, wearing a dress that cost more than she's ever spent on clothing, as the personal guest of the venue's owner. This drew a reluctant smile from him. "A dress I still haven't seen, by the way." "You will," I promised. "Saturday at 4 p.m. sharp." He moved further into the room, his expression turning serious. "I'll miss you these next few days." The simple admission touched me deeply. "I'll miss you too." We stood looking at each other for a long moment, the air between us heavy with unspoken feelings. Then, with a decisiveness that took my breath away, Gabriel closed the distance between us, his hands coming up to frame my face. "I've been trying to be patient," he said softly, "to give you time, to not rush whatever this is becoming. But Ellie, I need you to know." "What?" I whispered, my heart hammering against my ribs. "That finding you again has been the greatest gift of my life," he said simply. "That these past weeks have meant more to me than I can possibly express." Before I could respond, he leaned down and kissed me, gently at first, as if afraid I might break or disappear, then with growing intensity as I responded. His lips were warm and sure against mine, familiar and new all at once. I wound my arms around his neck, drawing him closer, rediscovering a hunger I'd thought long extinguished. When we finally parted, both slightly breathless, I saw in his eyes the same wonder I felt, that after all this time, after all the lives we'd lived separately, this connection could still burn so brightly. "I've been wanting to do that since the moment I saw you at the Fairmont," he admitted, his thumb tracing the curve of my cheek. "Only since then?" I teased, my voice unsteady. "I've been wanting it since 1968. His laugh was low and delighted. "Better late than never, Firestarter." As I drove back to Boston later that day, my lips still tingling from his kiss, I reflected on the extraordinary turn my life had taken. A month ago, I had been uninvited from my son's wedding, deemed too shabby for the rarefied atmosphere of Chateau Belmere. Now I was returning to prepare for that same wedding, but as a woman transformed, not by Gabriel's wealth or status, but by his recognition of my worth, and more importantly, by my own reclamation of it. The dress waiting in my apartment was evidence of this transformation. I'd purchased it during a rare shopping trip with Vivian, my oldest friend, who had listened with increasing astonishment as I'd recounted the events of the past weeks. "So let me get this straight," she'd said, as I emerged from a dressing room in what would become the dress. "You're working for the owner of this fancy chateau, who happens to be your first love from 50 years ago, who might be falling for you all over again, and who forced your ungrateful son and his snooty fiancée to invite you to their wedding." "That's a fairly accurate summary," I'd admitted. Vivian had studied me with shrewd eyes. "And how do you feel about all this? About him?" The question had given me pause. How did I feel about Gabriel Belmere? About the man who had reawakened parts of myself I'd thought long dormant? "Alive," I'd finally answered. "I feel alive." Now, as I prepared to attend the wedding that had once been the source of such humiliation, I carried that feeling with me like a talisman. Whatever happened next, with Gabriel, with William and Lexi, with my career, I would face it as this new, awakened version of myself. Eleanor Winters, the fire starter, was finally reclaiming her flame. The day of William and Lexi's wedding dawned clear and perfect, as if the weather itself had been arranged through her family's connections. I woke early in my apartment, anxiety and anticipation creating a flutter in my chest that made it difficult to focus on simple tasks. The dress hung on my closet door, a silent promise of transformation. Unlike the navy blue dress that had drawn Lexi's scorn at the engagement party, this one was a masterpiece of understated elegance, a silk sheath in deep copper that echoed my once vibrant hair color, now softened to a silvery auburn. Its price tag had made me wince, but Vivian had been adamant. If not now, when? She'd demanded. Besides, imagine that woman's face when she sees you in it. As I carefully applied makeup, more than my usual minimalist approach but still subtle, my phone chimed with a text from Gabriel. The chateau awaits its fire starter. See you at 4. The simple message steadied me. Whatever awkwardness today might bring, I wouldn't face it alone. Vivian arrived to drive me to Connecticut, insisting I couldn't possibly take a taxi to such an event. Besides, she'd said with characteristic directness, I want to meet this man who's got you glowing like a teenager. The drive passed quickly as I alternated between nervous chatter and contemplative silence. When the chateau finally came into view, I felt a curious sense of homecoming, not because of the building itself, magnificent as it was, but because I knew Gabriel waited within. Good Lord, Vivian murmured as we approached the entrance where staff directed arriving guests. When you said chateau, I pictured something nice, but this is straight out of a fairy tale. The restoration is remarkable, I agreed. You should have seen it before. Crumbling walls, leaking roof, gardens gone wild. And your Gabriel brought it back to life, she observed, giving me a knowing glance. Rather like what he's done with you, Before I could respond, a familiar figure appeared at the entrance. Gabriel, resplendent in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his silver hair gleaming in the afternoon sun. He spotted me immediately, his face lighting with a smile that made my heart perform an entirely undignified somersault. There you are, he said, moving forward to greet us. I was beginning to worry you'd changed your mind. And miss all this? I gestured toward the elegantly dressed guests streaming past us. Not a chance. He took my hand, raising it to his lips in a gesture that would have seemed affected from anyone else, but from him felt entirely natural. You look stunning, Ellie. That color. His appreciative gaze took in the copper dress, the careful arrangement of my hair, the pearl earrings that had been Robert's gift. Absolute fire. Vivian cleared her throat pointedly beside me. Gabriel, this is my dear friend Vivian Porter, I said. Vivian? Gabriel Belmere. The infamous Gabriel, Vivian said, shaking his offered hand. I've heard quite a lot about you recently. All good, I hope? He asked with a smile. Mostly wonder and amazement, with a healthy dash of schoolgirl crush, she replied, ignoring my mortified expression. It's refreshing, actually. I haven't seen Eleanor this animated in years. Vivian, I protested. Gabriel's laugh was warm and delighted. I like your friend, Ellie. She cut straight to the point. One of her many charming qualities, I muttered. Vivian patted my arm consolingly. I'll head in and find my seat. You two take your time. With a meaningful look at Gabriel, she added, be good to her. She deserves it. After she'd gone, Gabriel offered his arm. Shall we make an entrance, fire starter? I placed my hand in the crook of his elbow, drawing strength from his solid presence. Lead the way. The ceremony was to take place in the chateau's formal gardens, with the reception following in the grand ballroom. As we made our way through the grounds, heads turned and whispers followed. I caught fragments of conversation. The owner himself. Who's that woman with him? Never escorts guests personally. The attention was disconcerting, but Gabriel seemed oblivious, his focus entirely on me. Nervous? He asked quietly. A little, I admitted. I haven't seen William since that night in the dining room. He came by yesterday, Gabriel revealed. Asked about you, how you were doing, whether you were really planning to attend. This surprised me. What did you tell him? That you were a woman of your word, that despite everything, you wouldn't miss his wedding. Gabriel's expression softened. He seemed relieved, Ellie. I think he genuinely wants you here. I wanted to believe this was true, that beneath the ambition and social climbing, my son still valued my presence in his life, but experience had taught me caution. "We'll see," was all I said. The garden had been transformed for the ceremony, with white chairs arranged in precise rows and an arbor draped in cascading flowers marking the spot where William and Lexi would exchange vows. Gabriel led me not to the general seating area, but to the front row on the groom's side. "This is the family section," I whispered, suddenly uncertain. "Exactly where you belong," he replied firmly. As we took our seats, I was acutely aware of the curious glances from other guests. Lexi's family members, no doubt, wondering who this unknown woman might be, arriving on the arm of the chateau's enigmatic owner. I sat straighter, channeling the confidence that Gabriel's presence gave me. The ceremony proceeded with the flawless precision that I'd expected from a Thornfield production. Lexi was undeniably beautiful in a gown that probably cost more than my car, her face radiant with triumph as she processed down the aisle. William waited at the arbor, handsome and nervous, his expression softening as he caught sight of his bride. Despite everything, my heart ached with maternal pride and worry. Whatever his failings, he was still my son, still the baby I'd held through countless nights, the boy whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, the teenager whose heart I'd helped mend after his first heartbreak. I wanted him to be happy, to be good, to be the man I'd raised him to be. When the officiant asked, "Who gives this woman to be married?" and Lexi's father responded with practiced dignity, I found myself wondering who would speak for William. Robert was long gone. There was only me, the mother who had been deemed too shabby for this very event, to represent his history, his foundation. As if sensing my thoughts, Gabriel's hand found mine, his fingers interlacing with my own in silent support. The vows were exchanged, the rings presented, the kiss appropriately restrained for the formal setting. And then they were married, my son and the woman who had tried to exclude me from this very moment. The irony was almost too perfect. During the recessional, as William and Lexi moved back down the aisle, his eyes found mine. For a brief moment, something passed between us, recognition, acknowledgement, perhaps even a silent apology. I nodded slightly, offering a small smile that he returned before continuing past. "Well done," Gabriel murmured, as guests began to rise for the transition to the reception. "That can't have been easy." "Weddings never are for the mother of the groom," I replied lightly. "We're expected to wear beige, smile constantly, and keep our opinions to ourselves. You've never been good at any of those things," he observed with a smile. "Especially the beige part." I glanced down at my copper dress. Especially that. The reception was a masterpiece of elegant restraint, exactly what I would have expected from Gabriel's chateau. The grand ballroom, with its soaring ceilings and crystal chandeliers, had been set with round tables draped in ivory linens and centered with arrangements of pale roses and hydrangeas. A string quartet played softly in one corner, while uniformed staff circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Gabriel and I found Vivian at our assigned table, strategically placed neither too close to the bridal party nor insulting distant. A diplomatic compromise, I supposed. "This is something else," Vivian said as we joined her. "I feel like I've wandered into a movie." "Wait until you taste the food," Gabriel promised. "My chef has been planning this menu for weeks." The meal was indeed exceptional, each course more delicious than the last, paired with wines from Gabriel's personal cellar. Throughout dinner, a steady stream of guests approached our table, ostensibly to greet Gabriel, but clearly curious about me. With unfailing courtesy, he introduced me to each one as Eleanor Winters, the renowned art conservator working on my family's collection, and an old and dear friend. The phrase, "old and dear friend," seemed to take on new meaning with each repetition, his voice caressing the words in a way that suggested deeper connections. If anyone noticed the warmth in his gaze when he looked at me, they were too polite to comment directly. After dinner came the traditional events, the first dance, the cake cutting, the parent dances. When the DJ announced, "And now the groom will dance with his mother," I felt a moment of panic. We hadn't discussed this. Would William actually acknowledge me publicly in this way? My question was answered when William appeared at our table, his expression a mixture of determination and nervousness. "Mom, may I have this dance?" Gabriel squeezed my hand encouragingly as I rose to join my son on the dance floor. The DJ transitioned to a soft ballad, one I recognized with a start as a song I used to sing to William when he was small. "You remembered," I said softly as we began to move to the music. "Of course," he replied. "I remember everything you sang to me." He hesitated, then added, "I'm sorry, Mom, for everything, for letting Lexi say those things, for not standing up for you, for forgetting what matters." The simple apology, delivered as we danced before all his new in-laws and colleagues, meant more than any grand gesture could have. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "It matters that you recognize it." "Belmere made me see it," William admitted. "When I went to speak with him yesterday, he didn't lecture or threaten. He just asked me one question. What kind of man do you want to be?" My son's gaze was troubled. "It's been haunting me ever since." "And what kind of man do you want to be, William?" I asked gently. He looked over to where Lexi stood watching us, her expression carefully neutral. "A better one than I've been recently," he said quietly. "Someone who doesn't forget where he came from. Someone you could be proud of again." "I never stopped being proud of you," I told him truthfully. "Disappointed, yes. Hurt, certainly. But a mother's pride is remarkably resilient." As the song ended, William surprised me by pulling me into a tight hug. "I love you, Mom," he whispered. "Thank you for being here today." "I love you too," I replied, blinking back unexpected tears. "Always have, always will." When I returned to the table, Gabriel's questioning look was answered by my tremulous smile. "Progress," I said simply. "I'm glad," he replied, his hand finding mine beneath the table. As the evening progressed into dancing and celebration, Gabriel led me out onto the terrace for a moment of quiet. The sun was setting, painting the chateau grounds in golden light that reminded me of those long-ago summers when we'd explored these same gardens. "Happy?" he asked, his arm slipping around my waist. I considered the question seriously. "Yes," I decided, "not because everything is resolved. It isn't, and may never be completely. But because I'm here on my own terms, neither excluded nor included because of you, but present as myself, as Eleanor, the indomitable Eleanor," he agreed with a smile. "The woman who preserved beauty others overlooked, who raised a son alone, who never lost her fire even when others couldn't see it." "You always could," I said softly. "See it, I mean. Always," he confirmed, turning to face me fully. "From the first moment I saw you sketching in your father's classroom, tongue caught between your teeth in concentration, completely oblivious to the world around you." His hand came up to cup my cheek. "You were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen." "I was 17 and awkward," I protested. "You were magnificent," he corrected. "And you still are." The kiss that followed was different from our first, not the culmination of decades of wondering, but the promise of a future neither of us had dared to imagine. When we parted, I saw in his eyes the same certainty I felt in my heart. "What happens now?" I asked, not just about the evening, but about everything. Us, the chateau, the art collection, my life in Boston. Gabriel smiled, that transformative smile that had captivated me half a century ago and still held the same power today. "Now, Firestarter, we begin. Again. Together." As we turned back toward the reception, toward the celebration of a beginning that had unexpectedly catalyzed our own, I knew with absolute certainty that I was exactly where I belonged, not because of Gabriel's status or my son's wedding or the exquisite dress that had replaced my department store offerings, but because I had finally reclaimed the woman I was always meant to be, Eleanor Winters, the Firestarter, at last.